What's happening, Cardinal Nation? Welcome back to the CardinOLL podcast, a classroom podcast where we interview expert leaders that help take your leadership and your learning to the next level. And we try to do that as quickly as possible. Let me start off with a quote today. Never be limited by other people's limited imaginations. This is a quote stated by Dr. Mae Jemison, the first African-American female astronaut. With February being Black History Month, you don't want to miss any of our special guests this month that we will interview because they're some of the best leaders in the community and from the university. And trust me, they haven't been held back by anyone's imagination of them. These men and women are doing some phenomenal works in the community and at the university, so you don't want to miss this Black History Month edition of the CardinOLL podcast. I, as you can see by my moniker right below me, am Dr. C. Owens, also known by my social media moniker at the Professor Owens. And let me bring in the incomparable, he is my co-host, the incomparable Dr. Andrew McCart. Dr. McCart, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's really so glad to be here, and just another great leader here in our city that we get to hear from today. And I don't know how you and Susan find all these great guests, but keep it up because I'm learning a lot, and I know today will be no exception.
Oh, I am totally thrilled about today's guest, just like you are. But before we get into that, let's do our little commercial here, right? So anyone.
Yeah, I always jump in on the guest. I forget we got to pay our bills. So yeah, let's go ahead now.
So if you or anyone you know want to learn to lead with compassion and expertise in a changing world and obtain a degree from award-winning faculty within a nationally recognized program in the area of leadership and learning, check us out at uofl.me/BSOLL-podcast. Again, that's uofl.me/BSOLL-podcast. So now that we got that little bit of information out of the way, and as Dr. McCart alluded to, we've paid our bills for today, let me introduce to you our very amazing and special guest for today. He is the current chief operating officer and soon to be CEO of Louisville Tourism. He is from Denver, Colorado. He is, as we discussed earlier, he is a Buffalo at heart, but he is a Card by nature, right? He will be starting his position as the CEO of Louisville Tourism starting in July of 2021. So ladies and gentlemen, get your pens, get your pencils, get your notepads, your memo boards, whatever you take notes with ready as we learn and take some good nuggets from today's special guest, the one, the only, Mr. Cleo Battle. Mr. Battle, how you doing today?
Hello, Cardinal Nation. I love that.
Yes.
That was fantastic. I love what you said, Professor Owens. Never be held back by others' imagination of you. That was spot on. I'm gonna have to steal that one. I like that.
Hey, that came from Dr. Mae Jemison, so it's not stealing. Yeah. We borrow with ingenuity over here.
All right, I like it.
So here on the CardinOLL podcast, we obviously talk about leadership, we talk about organizational learning, and we do have fun with our guests as well all throughout this podcast. I can tell already this is going to be a great interview. I can tell already.
I hope so.
So let me start off with the number one question we go with everybody with. How do you, Mr. Battle, how do you define leadership?
Sure. Well, I think your basic definition is the act of leading others to accomplish goals that are both personally and professionally. And I think anyone that's ever worked for me understands that there are professional goals we want to achieve, but I also want to help to grow you as an individual. So some personal goals, and most of those individual goals are for you as a professional. So those things are important to me. I've got some simple anecdotes that I've had for a long time. As a leader, I try to manage to make sure I allow myself as well as others to give them permission to fail with ideas. I think that's very important, and you have to do it for yourself, and you have to do it for your team. I want myself and our leaders here to manage by being firm, fair, and consistent. And consistent being the key word there. I think that's very important as you try to lead a staff to success. And then probably one of my favorite sayings is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Go find another room. We should all want to be challenged by our peers all the time. The moment you want to be the smartest person in the room, you have decided that you don't need to learn anything else. And we should all, I don't care if you've been in an industry for 35 years or for 5 years, you should want to continue to learn. So, those are some of the things that I try to hold on to as I think about leadership and moving our team forward.
Man, that's good stuff. And I know me and Dr. McCart kind of laughed because when you said don't be the smartest person in the room, that is his that's one of his many go-tos. So Dr. McCart, what do you have to say?
Well, thank you, Dr. Owens. And Mr. Battle, I like that. Don't be the smartest person in the room. You're in the wrong room. And I also think that alludes to building people up. And so I had some teachers in martial arts years ago that said, we want you to be better than us and we want to help you excel. And I'm not sure I ever did, but that's the kind of leader that we all want to follow, someone that's that interested in our development. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So the next question here, and you mentioned being in an industry for 35 years, and which you have. You've been in the hospitality and tourism industry for a long time. I'm looking at your bio over here on the other screen, and it says you are really at the top of your field. And so our question is, who do you think best exemplifies your definition of leadership? And it's a little bit of a tough question because who do you look up to when you're really been in the field for 35 years and you're really at the top of your game? So where do you look for inspiration and examples?
Sure. I think there's probably always folks that are either people you see on the news regularly or celebrities. For me, I've had two really great mentors that have been my boss, but have become my friends that I have learned a tremendous amount from. And I continue to learn a tremendous amount from those two individuals. And I think it's important for any person, if you got young folks here from the Cardinal Nation, mentors are I can't tell you the value you will find in mentors. When I was 20, in my 20s, early in this industry, that was a suggestion that was made to me, and it has worked out well for me. But I'll tell you, there's a couple things I think about and I hang on to, and I heard Steve Jobs say something that's very similar to something I believe in. Hire well, provide good resources, and get the hell out of the way. And I think those things are key. And my old boss would always tell me the first one is the most important. You've got to hire well. And then those other two fall into place. Steve Jobs, I wrote down a quote he had that I love. Steve Jobs said, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do. We are smart people, we hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. And I think that is a perfect example of really what I believe in terms of the people I want around me. We've got to hire well. I don't know if you guys are big sports fans. I think Professor Owens is, but think about just the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Bruce Arians, the coach. Here's a coach who's been coaching for 40 years. Mm-hmm. And now he gets Tom Brady dropped in his lap. And a couple things that the coach said along the way when he's been asked about this, he said two things. I allowed Brady to coach. I took a step back. And that is so important when you think about leadership. It's like hire well. He hired well. He got Tom Brady. Provide the resources you need and get the hell out of the way. And that's exactly what Bruce Arians did, and he got a Super Bowl ring for it. So I don't know about mentor or someone specific as a celebrity, but I do believe in mentors. And, there's some folks that have made some comments that resonate with me along the way.
Oh, I think that's a great way of describing how you look up to leaders. And we can find a mentor in our circle, and we can find one in our organization chart. It's hard to get that conversation with a celebrity. And I think, you mentioned young people in the Cardinal Nation. Some of our students are, although they're working adults, they may be mid-level careerists looking to move up. And I think that asking for mentors is often overlooked. And the mentors are really, really glad to be asked and honored to pass down some of the information they've got. So, and you mentioned Tom Brady. I'm a big Colts fan, and he used to beat us every year, about twice a year from New England. It's amazing now that he's in another conference, I don't mind him quite so bad. But no, I think I love that too, that Bruce Arians stayed out of the way, and I heard that. And that hire well is so, I don't want our listeners to overlook that part. And I see some of your certifications here as a destination management executive, certified association sales executive. And that, my first job out of college was working for a rapidly growing theater chain. And so we would have to hire people in a crunch, very seasonal work. And the big holiday movie season was coming up, and we would have to get some people in there. And we had to, I joke about this, but we had a 2-step hiring process. Can you work Friday, and what size shirt do you wear? And that was all we needed.
That's a heck of a criteria.
The hard way of being a young manager, that take your time in that management process or that hiring process as a manager, because you're really bringing them in close, kind of bringing them in your inner circle, and that's the impression your customer is going to give. So I love that you said that.
Yeah.
Dr. Owens, what questions do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great. We're talking about mentors and finding people in your circle. I mean, a few months ago, I know me and Dr. McCart were talking about heroes, right? And heroes sometimes, Mr. Battle, we were talking about sometimes those celebrities that you can't get to, but like you just alluded to, like there's great quotes out there that they made that you can really lead by. So, kind of knowing that, segueing into the next question. My next question is, I mean, currently you're in the C-suite, right? You have the desirable position that any of our listeners will want to have. You sit in that room. And so could you tell us a little bit about your journey? And we know it started in Denver. You mentioned that you kind of moved around a little bit. But now you're sitting in that, that glorified position that everybody wants to be in, whether it's the CEO, the COO, the CFO, the CMO. Sure. Tell us about your journey.
So my journey is 2 chapters in 2 related industries. I spent 11, 12 years or so in the hotel business, and then I've been on the destination marketing side the remainder of my career. I'll tell you a couple of funny stories. One, I was a college track athlete, ran the hurdles in college, and I was undecided much longer than I should have been with my college education, because somewhere along the way, I guess I thought I was going to run in the Olympics. That didn't happen. I got hurt, and I go and I talked to a counselor, and she's telling me about a new curriculum called hotel restaurant management, and I'm thinking, well, one thing I've ever done in a hotel is trash it, so I don't know anything about a hotel, and. We leave the room. She signs me up. I start to take some classes in that area. It's going well. And someone reminds me, well, you need 1,200 hours in a hotel before you can graduate in terms of hours to graduate. So I get a hotel job. I'm working the front desk. I'm working a couple hours in the sales department. And so now I'm getting close to graduation. And I am trying to get into the management training program for the hotel company I was working for. And the person that I'm sending letters to, my GM is sending letters to, not responding back. So I don't know what's going on. I'm just 3 or 4 months from graduating. And I get to work one day, and my GM comes running up to me. I'm working the 3 to 11 shift because obviously I'm in school during the day. And he says, listen, the guy that we've been trying to get to, he's coming to the hotel tomorrow. He's going skiing. As you said, Professor Owens, I'm from Denver. So he was coming in to go skiing at the hotel. He says, you got to be here tomorrow night when he checks in. So sure enough, I'm there. I'm checking the guy in, and I'm so excited. I'm checking him in, and I'm tripping over all of my words. I'm like, I've been trying to get in touch with you. I want to get in the management training program, blah, 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 blah. Guy's like, well, listen, I don't have time. I appreciate it. I'll see your information when I get back to the office. I won't let him off the hook. I'm still like, well, I'd love to just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes to talk to you. The guy, he laughs, he takes a step back and he says, listen, I'm leaving this hotel at 6 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. If you're here at 5 a.m., I will talk to you at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. I said, absolutely. So long story short, I'm there at 5 a.m. with bells on, get hired into the management training program, graduate, go to Phoenix for the management training program. Then I go to LA in Orange County to work in a hotel as an assistant GM. I go to upstate New York to be a director of sales. And then I landed in Virginia to be a GM of a hotel. And at that point, I'm ready to start to transition. By this time I'm married, I've got young kids. And that's when I got on the Convention and Visitors Bureau side. And been working through that process in a number of different roles, mainly sales throughout my career. I guess it's been 20 some odd years, 23 years on the Convention and Visitors Bureau side. But I tell that story when I talk to a lot of folks because I look back at myself then and thought, man, the perseverance I had getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, thinking I was going to be an Olympic athlete. I get hurt and I pivot. You think about how much we've heard the word pivot the last few months. And, I look back on myself and, all of our younger selves leave a little bit to the imagination. But, I was glad that I made the decisions that I did at that time.
Man, that's
just a little bit of a story. There's obviously a lot more, but we'd be here all night and have to start drinking bourbon.
I think your story, it kind of reminded me of, the story that kind of how Dr. Eric Thomas got famous, right? With the meet me in the ocean at 5 a.m. in the morning. And if you want to be rich, and the guy was like, what am I doing here? And he was like, he pretty much drowns the kid and says, when you want to be rich as much as you want to breathe, then you can be successful. And I think when I was hearing your story, that's kind of what if you can meet me, if you meet me here at 5 a.m., right? That's really, really, I'm not saying that's how your journey started, but that was a big part of it. It started at 5 a.m. If you would have missed that meeting, I mean,
that's right.
I hope we still would be interviewing Mr. Battle today,
yeah,
right, on this podcast, but we don't know.
But I definitely think of it as a pivotal moment. I got up at 5 a.m. and I got that job. I got that management training job that set my career off. And so I do think of it that way.
That's amazing. Dr. McCart?
For me.
Yeah.
Well, we talk so much about just the willingness to suit up and show up. And I was in my 30s, so I'd heard of 5 a.m. I knew there was a 5 p.m. I'd been there, but I didn't know there was a 5 a.m. too. But yeah, that's showing that commitment, that willingness to get up and do the work. That's kind of been a common theme on our podcast as we talk to leaders around the city and the region here. So I want to ask you about your leadership style and what things describe your leadership style. But before I give you a chance to answer that, you've really got quite a position in our city, and you're just working with a number of different stakeholders. And I look at some of the top events projected for the Louisville's recovery of really a robust tourism industry. And we'll talk a little more about that. But we were in between houses, my wife and I, we stayed downtown, and I was amazed at how and this was 2019, and the convention center, just twice a week, there was a new group of people coming in, whether it was for the Street Rod Nationals or Livestock Expo or the Mid-America Trucking Show. I mean, these are some major events. The Derby, of course, everyone knows, $200 million impact, and then camps and clinics and Run for the Roses and the Utility Expo. There's so many things that unless you're part of that, you don't know they're going on unless you're right down there. So I guess I'll ask you, with really having your work cut out for you as part of this recovery. I know you've got a great team there from the research that we've done on the website here, but how does your leadership style, how would you describe it, and the ability to bring all these stakeholders together and manage such big events and the marketing for the city?
Yeah, so listen, I will get back to me in a moment. I will tell you about just this community here that's in the hospitality industry. You know, as you said, if you've been in this community, I've lived here for about 8 years. And in the 8 years, I've seen more growth in our particular sector from the renovation of the convention center, new hotels being built downtown and out throughout Jefferson County. We've seen, you know, when I moved here, there was not a micro distillery in town. Now we have roughly 8 or 9 of them right in downtown. As we say to folks, you know, you can go to Napa or Sonoma, but you got to drive between each of those wineries. Here, you walk between the distilleries. So you think about just that investment in the infrastructure of our segment, and just, you know, for your audience, you know, when you think about Louisville tourism, so our jobs are to bring visitors to town. That's plain and simple. Now, how do we define visitors? There's leisure visitors, there are corporate visitors, and there are meeting and convention visitors. And we operate at Louisville Tourism primarily with leisure visitation and meeting and convention. So we have a robust sales department that travels around the country to try to attract the National Association of Pencil Makers to come and bring their annual 5,000 people to town in 2023. You know, as I always say to folks, you know, in this office, we deal a lot with, you know, 2 to 4 years out, and that's usually sort of when we are booking big conventions. So you've got that arm. And then the other arm is the growth of leisure visitation. So you think about all those assets that I was just describing that have been developed. When I moved here 8 years ago, our visitation was a little over 12 million people annually. In 2019, prior to the pandemic, we were at 19 million visitors annually. And so we have moved the needle considerably in terms of the number of visitation. But again, we had infrastructure developed, and you know we've done a really good job of unifying our brand in terms of how do we market ourselves in the meeting and convention space, as well as how we market ourselves in the leisure space. So, you know, post-pandemic, you know, our number one goal is how do we bring the 19 million people back to Louisville? And, you know, we feel like we have a pretty good strategy for what we've done the last few years to grow visitation here, and we'll double down on those efforts to bring visitors back. So that's a little bit about that. You know, in terms of leadership style, I will tell you, and you're going to hear as we continue to talk, there's some common themes with me. Engagement, empowerment, and humility are probably the things that for me, that's my leadership style summed up in 3 words. And I'll go back to hiring well. I don't know if you had a chance to read the book, Team of Rivals about Abraham Lincoln, written by Doris Kearns Goodwin. When she talks about Abraham Lincoln, when he's putting his cabinet together, he hired the best people he could, that he was aware of for those positions, even if they were from a different party, and even if he knew they didn't like him, he wanted the best around him. Now, I don't think I have rivals here at Louisville Tourism, but we certainly have made it an effort to hire the best professionals, whether here in Louisville or in Kentucky or throughout the United States, if we can find to bring here so we can be the best professionals we can for this hospitality market here in Louisville.
Well, I'm glad you sort of gave us some of the numbers there, because we, Dr. Owens and I have degrees in business, as well as we see that you do too. You've got an MBA, and that really helps. I didn't know the 19 million, but I do see 200,000 for the National Farm Machinery Show and 200,000 for the International Livestock Expo. And I mean, those people need a place to stay, and restaurants, and safety, and traffic has to get in and out. And so it is, doesn't just happen. That 2 to 4 years out planning is such an important component of that. So
Absolutely.
thanks for
And
taking this.
and we have a great, aside from the folks that are in the hospitality community specifically, you mentioned the police, you mentioned, EMS, and we have a great team of external professionals that service and provide for our visitors in this community. That is just as important, because what you were just saying, what kind of experience you're going to have. It's one thing to get the visitor here, but can we have that visitor do a return visitation? We did a visitor profile study just a few years, a year and a half ago. We completed it, and over 70% of the people that completed the visitor profile study said this was not their first trip to Louisville. And that's how you get those numbers, is because when you get here, there's an experience that's more than you getting a hotel, getting on a plane, and getting to Louisville. We've got to provide a great experience. And so that's just as important in our process.
Yeah, I think so too. And I grew up around here, and I think there's so many great things about it. There's the city and all the things that you mentioned, from the tours to the restaurants but also nature. There's so much nature, and it's not as expensive as if you go to some of the East Coast cities, for instance. And so anyway, I don't need to tell you that, but Dr. Owens, I know you want to transition to the learning questions.
Yeah, just so we talked a lot about leadership. We talked a little bit about leadership, but we learned a lot, right? We learned about I wrote that down. Engagement, empowerment, and humility. I think that those are three critical areas that, what I love about our podcast is that you're learning from people who really are leaders, and telling you, hey, these are the nuggets that we have. And really no leader that I can recall has really repeated their nuggets. And I think that's a good thing, because it's just showing that no leader really leads the same, right? No one, even though we may have this common quote unquote definition, we probably shouldn't. Leadership should be just as flexible as the person who's leading, right? That's right. And so I really value that. And I hope that our listeners are taking those nuggets away. Like, hey, if you work for Mr. Battle, it's going to be about engagement, it's going to be about empowerment, and it's going to be about humility. But if you work for somebody else, those might not be their top three category, and that's perfectly okay. And right. as you're growing as a leader, right, develop your own, right? Develop what you feel is important. And I think that's going to be great. And that does kind of tie into my next question, Mr. Battle, is just saying this. So you've been in this industry for a long time. You've seen a lot change over the time, over your years in this industry. So how do you think learning has changed or is changing, with the people and volunteers now that you're at Louisville Tourism? How do you see that shifting? How do you see that playing out?
Sure. Our industry is a funny one, in that it's a earn your stripes industry. And I would always explain this when I was talking to students who are majoring in our programs in different parts of the country. You can be an engineer student or a computer science student, and you may come out and high jump a lot of folks that have been working because you've got new technology or whatever it is, and make a great salary. And no offense to that. In the hospitality industry, it's stripes on the arm. Some of the best hospitality schools in the country are probably Cornell, UNLV, Las Vegas, or Michigan State, are great hospitality programs. If you left that program and you had never stepped foot in a hotel, restaurant, or convention center, you are going to start at the very bottom. We're earn your stripes. This is an industry where you learn by doing. Mm-hmm. If you're in a hotel, if you're in a convention center, if you're in a restaurant, if you're in a museum or attraction, you learn by doing. These are public facing jobs. And so you're going to learn as you go through the process of working with the public and working with your other peers. The one thing, I guess, in my time with with technology, I guess what's changed is the expectation of our customer. I think our customers expect things quicker. They want quicker access to information on the website. And I think, you want quicker, when our salespeople are dealing with clients, they want quicker responses to requests they may have made. But I will tell you, the learning in our industry is still the same. Now, some of it may take place on a computer, but there's still, people are going to ask you, well, how long you've been in the job, and what kind of experience have you had doing that job? And it's great that you got a degree, but we want to talk about your experience. And I don't know that I see that changing in our industry anytime soon, just because of the very nature of what our industry is. When you think of, our hoteliers, our restaurants, our convention centers, museums and attractions, they can't work from home. Mm-hmm. These are not work from home jobs. They have to be there. They have to operate their facilities. So technology and social media, it certainly has had an impact when you think about marketing, when you think about customer expectation. But in the way we learn in our industry, not a lot of change there.
Yeah, that's good to know. I think that's great to know, actually. I mean, because that's something that even in higher education, right? The goal is always to try to, how do we get you as much experience before we kind of throw you to the wolves, so to speak, of the workplace environment. And to know that there's an actual industry out there, and this is new information for me, right? There's an actual industry out there that prides itself in, getting those stripes on your arm. That is totally amazing. That is, that to me helps me as a professor to really up my game a little bit. Again, as we had another podcast guest kind of say, you learn from all different industries on how to get better at certain things. I think that's something I'm definitely going to take from this conversation, how to improve, and say, listen, how do I make sure that when you leave this needs assessment class, when you leave this coaching and talent development course, that you are maybe not an expert, but you have something that you can bring to your industry to make yourself better. Dr. McCart, you got anything?
Well, I do have some things. I really enjoyed there what Mr. Battle said, several of the things he said. And so I just want to come back to that idea of getting the stripes on your arm and really being willing to start at the bottom. Like you said, even if you came from Cornell or Michigan, or even if someone came from the Metropolitan State University in the Twin Cities, that everyone still has to earn their stripes, which is where Mr. Battle went, which looks like a great school as well. And I think people, early careerists, it seems like a little bit of a trend these days where they don't want to start out at the bottom and earn their stripes there, even though if they just would, they'd be surprised how quick they could rise in an organization if you're just willing to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. But some people want to skip that step. And I always heard the elevator's broken. You got to take the steps in your career, but then you'll get there before you know it. So
I like that.
Well, Dr. Owen says I've got a lot of go-to sayings, and
I like that one.
Listen, he's got a million of them. He's got a million of them, right? There's never a dull moment with Dr. McCard on here. Never a dull moment. I'm taking notes too. Don't get it twisted.
Yeah, it's recycled material, but yeah, that was one thing I really enjoyed that you said there, and I guess I'll lead into our next question. But what are some things that you've learned throughout your career? When we could say one thing or three things that you've learned from your career that you hope to bring into your new role in this organization, that you'd like to really move us into the future here and recover in this tourism industry in Louisville?
Well, I'll tell you, top of the list, and this is prior to COVID and because of COVID, we don't make a widget at Louisville Tourism. We don't own a hotel. We don't have a museum or attraction. Mm-hmm. The value of Louisville Tourism is in the professionals that work here. And, that can never be forgotten in these offices. And again, that's another reason when you go back to why we need to hire well, is because this industry and this community depends on the professionalism at Louisville Tourism to do the marketing, to bring the big meetings in, the conventions, to get the visitors here. You've got to have the right professionals in place. So the value of our professionals, critical. And it's became, I guess for me, it was doubled down by COVID, the importance of your professionals in your office. I think the other thing, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, when I first got here, and I don't want to throw stones at anyone, but we didn't have our brand unified. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple. We had a few different messages, and over the last few years, we've been able to unify our brand. And I have learned the importance of a unified brand. I don't have any specifics to tell you or to tie it specifically together, but what I can tell you, once we unified our brand, we saw year-over-year growth in our visitation numbers. When we unified our brand, we saw year-over-year growth in the numbers of meetings and conventions we were bringing to this community. And so that has just been a huge takeaway for me. I don't have anything to specifically tie those, but one sort of correlates with the other. And I think it's very important to get your brand unified on who you are and what you want to communicate in all your sectors, in your leisure sector, in your meeting and convention sector. And I guess finally, as we've talked about this community, probably the buy-in of our stakeholders, being transparent with our stakeholders. We've got a very sophisticated hospitality community here with a lot of expectations. So it's important that they have buy-in to our strategies and the goals that we want to accomplish for this community. So those are probably some of the main takeaways when I think about moving forward into that job in the future, things that I will take with me and will be important.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Battle. And it's you mentioned a consistent message and the unifying your marketing and your branding. And we think about that as just consistent communication from the top down, so where people are on the same page. And in other industries, I mean, when we're talking in the classroom or with industry partners, that importance of having a consistent, clear message so that there's no guessing as to what the mission is today or what we're trying to get done this year or over the next 2 to 4 years, as you said, that there's we all know what it is, and we ought to be able to tell you if you stop us in the hallway and ask. So
that's right.
I think that's
right.
A great takeaway, Dr. Owens. I know you're taking notes over there, so I'd be sure to add that to your list so we can review it later. But
listen, I'm an avid note taker, and but to piggyback off that, I'm starting to. I mean, when Mr. Battle was speaking, it reminded me of one of our very first guests, which was Vince Tyber, the athletic director at the University of Louisville. He made a very similar comment. He was like, definitely he wasn't casting stones or talking about previous administration, but he was just saying, like, kind of like you were saying, we weren't unified in our front. It was just, if you ask this person, it might be this answer. If you ask that person, it might be that answer. But one thing he said I had to do was get everybody on the same page. The same page, but it's like in the same book. Right. Yeah. Everybody's got to be on the same book and the same page, the right edition. And we got to be doing this lockstep together to kind of turn this. And not that anything needed to be turned around and not that anything was falling apart and there were a bunch of fires. But like you said, once they got unified, it makes it a lot easier to course correct. And like you said, and I think your data is saying, hey, we went from 12 million to 19 million. Right. And the one thing that we did in that process was, we had a unified brand. We brought in and we got everything on the same page, and we saw what happens once we were not scattered, but once we weren't unified, there was 12 million. Once we got unified, 19 million. I think right. your data is speaking for itself. And then my last question, not last question total, my last question concerning the learning part is this. So what are a few things that make Louisville tourism, in your opinion, a great place to work or be involved with? Because as Dr. McCart alluded to, there is a way to kind of be like a certified travel person for Louisville tourism.
CTA.
I don't want to mess up any names. I'll let you get into all that. But, what makes this a great place or a great organization to get involved with?
Yeah, Certified Tourism Ambassador, CTA. It's a program we offer to our frontline staff Prior to the pandemic, we had started to work with JCPS as we were trying to attract more younger folks to want to go into hospitality. We were working with GLI and JCPS's Academies program. And so one of the things we were doing with this Academies program is taking students that were juniors or seniors and putting them through the CTA program. It's basically a Louisville ambassador program, helps you sort of understand the history, things to do, what's fun. So great. Yeah, it's a great program. I appreciate you mentioning it. And we continue to take frontline folks through that program. I'll tell you just quick, simple things about working here. Great group of professionals and a group of folks that have worked here for a long time, which always says a lot about an organization. We are fortunate because we're going to have the perks of the job. When a new restaurant opens, hey, we want someone from Louisville Tourism folks to come down. New museum or attraction. If there's a new ride out of Kentucky Kingdom, hey, Louisville Tourism, you guys need to come out. So there's some fun aspects to the job with that. I also think it's fun to deal with those customers we just talked about, the leisure customers and the meeting and convention customers, because beyond, leisure customers are usually coming for fun. So they want to talk to you about what's fun to do. How can you help my vacation be great? So how fun of a job is that when you get to talk to people and help people to have a great experience? And, even same thing with the meeting and convention folks. They're coming for some business, but after that, they want to know what's fun to do. Where should I go? What experience should I have? So I just think, when you're in the hospital, when I was on the hotel side, it was the same thing. People check into the front desk and they want to know what's fun to do. Where should I go? It's a great industry for that because people tend to be happy. They want to have a great experience in your community. So I think we all, no matter what level we are in the hospitality industry or here at Louisville Tourism, I think we all enjoy that aspect of the job. It's what makes it a great place to work, or a lot of those types of things.
Yeah, that's great to know. I mean, it seems like you guys, like you said, one definition. In my former life, I thought I was going to be a football coach for the rest of my life. Obviously, that didn't work out, but I'm so great it didn't. But one thing you mentioned professionals, and one definition I always told the players and the athletes, a professional is someone who has mastered the basics, right? And when you said you have great professionals that work for that kind of clicked in my head that you are working with some people who just have mastered the basics of tourism, hotel, hospitality, customer experience. Like they've mastered those simple things and become really good at it. And that's kind of what's made the environment and the space at Louisville Tourism a great place to work.
That's right. Again, as long as you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, it's amazing what you can, the type of people you can have around you as professionals.
No doubt. So learning takes place in great environments, such as Louisville Tourism, but also like we do at the University of Louisville. It's one of those great environments. So come challenge yourself to lead with compassion and expertise in a changing world and learn from award-winning faculty at a nationally recognized program that specializes in leadership and learning. Check out our bachelor's, master's programs at uofl.me/podcast-OLL. Again, that's uofl.me/podcast-OLL. So continuing on with that, Dr. McCart, is there anything that you want to kind of segue in on this?
Well, you all are having a lot of fun, and I want to bring it back to the numbers here. And as a an old business person here, I've got some questions around that. And it's really one question that I was glad to see on our list, Dr. Owens, because I was thinking about this interview and preparing. And I thought, how do you measure success in such a wide scale? Like you said, you don't manufacture widgets. I heard a preacher in Indiana say that we can count nickels or we can count noses, but we got to find out some way that we're making a difference. And I mean, I'm looking here at your website saying things like Louisville is one of the 8 emerging American destinations, one of the top 6 places to visit in 2021 from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, top 5 trending destinations. those are the kind of accolades that I love to see here for our city. But how do you, what are some data points? And you mentioned people, we mentioned
Sure.
some numbers these events bring in. And so the question is, in this data-driven, data collection, algorithmic world, in addition to the fun that you mentioned in your last response, how do you measure success, and what data points do you use?
Sure. Well, for us, the number one data point is occupancy and average daily rate, or ADR. So what occupancy are we running in the city? What did we run last year? 2020 versus 2019. Obviously, we know 20 was not going to be good, but we would look year over year at our occupancy. And for the last few years prior to the pandemic, occupancy was growing. We look at the average rate. Is the average rate growing along with the occupancy? And it indeed was, which are great signs for our community. The other data point we look at, and I think we are held accountable to by our stakeholders, our museums and attractions want to see that their attendance visitation numbers go up. So whether you are the Ollie Center or the Slugger Museum or the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience, they want to see that their attendance numbers go up every year from visitation. And so those are important as well. When you think about hotels and the convention center, they want to know that, okay, how many hotel room nights in meetings and conventions did you all book this year? So, for example, and I don't know this off the top of my head, but in 2019, let's just say we booked 700,000 room nights for future years in terms of meetings and conventions that will take place either at the hotel or a convention center or both. Well, the next year, they're going to want to see that number move to 720,000 room nights. So those are some of the things that we are measured on and that we look at on a regular basis. Are we growing meeting and convention room nights? Are we growing the occupancy and the ADR? Are we growing visitation to our museums and attractions, or some of the other things? And then you think about a new goal we started last year. We set this prior to the pandemic. When you think about new strategies and new initiatives, we said, of the 19 million people that were coming to Louisville, 11% of those were African American. So how do we grow our African American visitation to the community? And you develop strategies around that. And those are initiatives that are, again, supported by our museums and attractions, supported by our hotels, because they want to hear about new visitors coming to town as well, because hotels, museums, and attractions tend to measure things not by the color of your skin, but by the color of the dollars in your pocket. And so those are important as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I saw on your website here that there are 2 new Black Heritage tours. And I imagine that's right in line with what you're talking about there. And one other thing that let's see, I just had it here, Mr. Battle, but it was the Louisville scored a perfect score on a human rights city. And so another thing that I didn't know, even being a resident here, but I found out on your website. So just getting the news out there that Louisville is an inclusive, diverse city, which people might not expect in Kentucky. And Louisville was the only city in Kentucky that got that perfect score. But just getting the news out it's so good for all of us to take pride in and to feel good about that. We're doing business here and we're educating people here. So yeah. Thank you.
And I'll tell you, we've done 3 things. And one, as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, one of the first things we did is we said, well, we want to look at our own organization. Mm-hmm. So we did an audit of our organization, looking at our hiring, our procurement, our marketing, and we've got that report, and we have an internal group of folks to work through where we need to improve as an organization. The second thing we did is to say, you know what, we want to make sure when visitors come to town that they feel like it's a friendly, inclusive place to visit. So we are planning our third, in the last 9 months, our third DEI training for everyone in our hospitality community who wants to sign up. And, this is just a service we're providing. So whether you are a hotel, a convention center, a museum, or attraction, we do these DEI training sessions that last for a couple hours. So our industry, our sector can be better at being inclusive of all that want to come here and visit. We created a Black Tourism Advisory Council a few months ago. And we created this council, and we have a LGBTQ council as well. But we created the Black Tourism Advisory Council to do some of the things that we just talked about. So how can we make sure that Black businesses here in the community can take advantage of tourism, whether it's meetings or conventions or leisure visitors when they come into the community? We want this group to look at our marketing efforts and make sure, are we being inclusive of who we're marketing to and who we're trying to attract? We want to make sure that when we start to increase our African-American visitation from the 11%, when they come to town, can they get the quintessential African-American experience in town? Help us to design that. What restaurants should they go to? Where should they shop? We want to make sure all that information is available. So that was our Black Tourism Advisory Council. Then the last piece, Dr. McCard, that you mentioned, we just launched our Unfiltered Truth collection, which is part of our Black Heritage experience. And this is so neat because you think about like Churchill Downs. So there's a lot of folks that don't realize the first 13 of 15 jockeys that won the Kentucky Derby were African American. And Thomas Bullock, who was the first African American, I think it was 1917, who created a cocktail book. And he's loosely affiliated with being the originator of the old-fashioned cocktail. So that experience will be done at Evan Williams. And you've got the Muhammad Ali Center. So we want to market this Unfiltered Truth collection nationally so that, again, that 11% number can grow to 12, 13, 14, 15% in upcoming years. So we've tried to do a lot in that space to grow, but not just about bringing people here. How do we make the business case here locally for why tourism is important to the Black community?
Well, thank you for going through all that.
That's probably a little bit more than you asked for, but I put it out there.
Well, that's why I love a podcast. It's a long form interview, so we can really get into things and you could feel like you're not in a rush. It's not a 3.5 minutes on the morning show and we're going to run to a commercial. No, you said plenty, and you said a lot of great things there. And I just want to talk back on that diversity, equity, and inclusion training that you're doing for the hospitality industry. And we have a number of nationwide experts on that subject in our departments. Dr. Ishawanza Rivers, Dr. Douglas Craddock, Dr. Randy Whetstone, our very own Dr. Owens here. Over time, and I'm volunteering them for work, they'll may hear this and not appreciate it, but there's really some folks that are out there, and they are speaking at the Muhammad Ali Center and other things. If we can provide introductions and help with that, we'd be happy to, because it's, as you say, it's not just bringing people from outside, but we've got some real assets here too.
Yeah, and I would love that. I think what we've used 3 different consultants, and we got a recommendation from the Urban League here in Louisville. And we want to continue to use different voices to give different folks opportunity to help educate our industry on DEI initiatives. So I'd love to have those names. It'd be great.
Yeah, great. Well, Dr. Owens, what do you think here? You're bringing me back on track, so I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
Oh, we were never off track. Again, this is what the whole point of the podcast is to really kind of expose, Mr. Battle and Louisville tourism to some audience and some people and some things that maybe either we don't have, or maybe there's an audience out there that we can expose him to as well. So I think we're never off topic because we can do those things. But what I do want to ask, because I know we are running short on time, I do want to ask this question right here is what can we begin to expect to see with you leading Louisville tourism moving forward? We mentioned before in the introduction that starting in July of 2021, you will move from COO to CEO, and it's been a wonderful thing. It's good. It's going to be a happy marriage. But what can we begin to expect? Hopefully, we know we want to help you take that 19 million number higher. But what can we expect with you leading the ship?
You read my brain. You know, there's two things that are just immediate. One, we've got to reestablish our brand back in the markets that we were in. We've got to get our 19 million people back from, post-pandemic. So there's some work there, because you got to understand every other city in the country is trying to do the same thing at the same time. So we've got some work to do there. Karen Williams, my predecessor, who's president and CEO here, she is a long professional, more years than I have in this industry. So those are large shoes for me to fill. She's a friend. She's a mentor. Her and I just completed our destination strategic plan just a few months ago, back in October. And this has been about 18 months working through this plan. And it's a plan for the next 10 years, or different things that we can do to improve Louisville from a tourism perspective. The main point of that document, and this is where we were when we started that document, is that we want, by 2030, we want to bring 25 million visitors to Louisville by 2030. Mm-hmm. And that will be my goal. Yes, we've got to get the 19 million back first, and we'll do that. But by 2030, and this was the goal prior to the pandemic, and it's still the goal today, we're going to have 25 million visitors in this community by 2030. So that will be my mission. There's a lot of action items underneath trying to get that done over the next few years, but that will be my focus, is increasing the number of visitors that we have to this community.
Man, that's an amazing goal. So all the listeners out there, tell your cousins, tell your friends, tell your next door neighbors who haven't been to Louisville to come to Louisville. We're doing some great things here. We got a lot of things. You mentioned your those audits. Especially for our African American community, if you're out there, we definitely got to get that number up. We want more than 11%. We know everybody likes to travel. Everybody got a couple extra dollars now because of COVID. Hopefully, you haven't been spending as much money on gas and travel. So put Louisville as the number one destination city when you're looking to book travel with friends and family members. Louisville is the place to come and to be. That being said, we always ask our guest a fun question. We're just gonna have a little fun. And so I've thought long and hard, what fun question do I want to ask Mr. Battle? And I really think I want to ask this question right here. Mr. Battle, if you could go back in time and there's a 13-year-old you somewhere out there, what would you tell the 13-year-old you today?
What would I tell the 13-year-old you today? I think the 13-year-old you spent a lot of frustrating times. Mm-hmm. Would have always wanted to quit things. If it didn't go his way, wanted to quit. And I would tell that 13-year-old to learn to persevere. Okay. At 13, I wasn't running hurdles, probably a couple years later. And I can tell you, when you run hurdles, you learn how to deal with obstacles, because that's all I ran in college. And so if you can't learn to overcome those obstacles and succeed, you're going to have a problem. And I think those hurdles taught me a lot about life and getting through life. And so that's what I would tell the 13-year-old. Learn to persevere.
Sweet. And before we let you go today, because this conversation could go on for a long time, because Mr. Battle's a great sports fan, so we can talk sports all day. Dr. McCart's a sports fan. We could do this all day, but we got to let you go because we all have things to do. We all got this thing called work, right? We're adults now. We have to work. But, right, what is your wise counsel? I don't like using the word advice because no one adds vices to anything. So what would be your wise counsel that you would shout from the mountaintops connected to tourism, hospitality for the rest of 2021? We got the vaccine. We know we need to get numbers up. Mr. Battle, what's your wise counsel?
My wise counsel is wear your mask and come visit. I think our facilities have all done everything they need to do to be safe. Our restaurants are social distance. Let's get back out and let's enjoy. Our sector really struggled through the pandemic, but they have made the accommodations in their facilities to welcome you. And so my counsel would be put your mask on and come visit.
Sweet. Well, thank you for visiting with us today, right? Even though we didn't wear a mask because we're all socially distanced, that's phenomenal, right? But thank you for coming visiting with us today. We appreciate it. I've learned a lot. Dr. McCart, did you learn a lot today?
I did learn a lot. One thing I thought of, though, if people come to visit Louisville, they may want to move here, and I don't know how that's going to impact your metrics once they love it so much they just stay.
That's fine. There's more people. There's more people out there, Dr. McCart.
Okay, that's right. They'll bring more friends. So,
all right, Mr. Battle, you have a great day.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
So, Dr. McCart, what about you? What did you learn? What were your takeaways from today's podcast?
I always like to bring it back to me. So I used to work in hospitality in some summers. I worked at a hotel chain in Alaska, and that was that can be some hard work. But there's good people in the hospitality industry that they come from different places. They've spent time in different, just like Mr. Battle. He traveled around. He worked in a number of different places in the country, and had a great history that he could tell us about and learn from. And I wasn't. I knew we were going to learn a lot, and I didn't know which direction it was going to take him because it's not an industry I know a whole lot about. But gosh, what great things for our city that he's out there doing to help raise awareness and to show off these assets that we have, whether it's Black Heritage Tours or the diversity in other ways and training people. I mean, it just goes to show whatever industry you're in, whatever wherever you are at in the country, you've got a way to make a difference and to help elevate everybody. And I think I can rest easy knowing Mr. Battle's stepping into that the CEO role and is going to continue to help grow Louisville tourism.
Oh, most definitely. I feel. Listen. He's full of energy too. You could tell it, right? I don't know if I'm sure our podcast listeners could feel his energy through the podcast, through this, whether you're listening through audio or video. But let me go ahead and put our last plug out here, Dr. McCart, for our OLL program. That's how we pay our bills and make sure that we can keep this podcast rolling. The OLL program here at the University of Louisville fosters leadership, learning, and performance to provide relevant solutions for a changing world. We offer programs at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels. Our programs educate professionals who focus on leadership, organizational development, human resources, and workforce development in order to benefit individuals, organizations, and society. Feel free to check us out at uofl.me/ELEOD-OLL. Again, that's uofl.me/ELEOD-OLL. My final thoughts are simple. Come to Louisville. Wear your mask and come to Louisville. Wear your mask and come to Louisville. I think that sums up everything that Mr. Battle mentioned out there. What do you think? You think that's a good summary? Did I summarize that well?
You do summarize it well, and I'm so glad that live events are coming back and all the things that in public health, we talk about the people in public health who played a part of this, healthcare workers, tourism, just everyone making sure that it's a safe, fun environment to come back and we can enjoy all the things that we love to do here in our great city of Louisville.
That's it. So as we say around here, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. When you teach, you never know how many lives you will influence. So Cardinal Nation, keep leading, keep learning, keep influencing. We hope to see you soon. And oh, by the way, we are now on Spotify. Check out the Cardinal Call podcast on Spotify. But until then, like, subscribe, comment, so you are updated about any of the podcast information that we have putting out, as well as information connected to an OLL program. Until then, take care and stay safe.